the 24th and the 26th of March, or from the 24th to the 26th of March, the historic Constitution Hill will host South Africa's only annual Human Rights Festival. And this year, the festival theme is Seize the Power. We're now joined by human rights activist and editor of Maverick Citizen, Mark Heywood. Mark, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for your time. Seize the Power. What informed this theme?
Well, what informs the theme Seize the Power is the idea that, in South Africa, many people now are complaining about failures of human rights. People are hungry, people don't have access to proper healthcare services, people are concerned about the quality of basic education. And the theme of this year's Human Rights Festival is that the power to solve all of this lies within each of us. That by becoming active citizens in our community, by becoming human rights activists, by taking advantage of the powers that are given to us by the Constitution, that we can actually build a country that can deliver social justice, equality, and the dreams that we have. So it's a 3-day festival, most of it taking place on Saturday and Sunday next weekend, where there are going to be debates and conversations and skills-building sessions and music and book fairs and exhibitions all around themes of human rights, because, of course, Tuesday is Human Rights Day in South Africa.
Mark, how do you take advantage of the power as provided by the Constitution when some would very well argue that, well, I have been disempowered for the past over 28 years. My quality of life has not changed. I'm too hungry or too angry to even be able to do something about it. And even if you do, people take to the streets, they burn the tires in protest of a lack of service delivery, basic human rights that they are not afforded. And then what? Things still don't change.
Well, I think that's a very good question, and that's the type of question we want to debate and hopefully answer at the festival. My answer to that is that active citizenship isn't a matter of a moment or a single protest. Peaceful protests are very important to highlight an issue, to highlight a right that is being violated, to put it on the agenda of government or business. But peaceful protest needs to be followed up with further action, with engagement with government, with questioning why something is not being budgeted for, with using the courts. What we've seen in South Africa is that when people do persist with claiming human rights and organizing for human rights, we get results. The best example still is something that I was involved in, which was, in the early days of the AIDS epidemic, the position of the government was to deny people access to medicines that could save their lives. And we organized around that. And today there are 5 million people in South Africa who receive antiretroviral medicines that keep them alive every single day through the public healthcare system. So we have to believe in our own power, and we have to believe in our power to change society for the better. If we despair, we just become demobilized and the problems are perpetuated.
Speaking of changing society for the better, let's profile a number of people or stakeholders that will be involved. Tell us about Faiza Lok of Rise Mzansi, a new community-based political movement, a young woman who is doing the most in terms of changing society.
Well, Faiza Lok, I think you've described her. She's a young woman, a young activist. She's part of various community organizations and is working to try to improve her community, but also to try to improve the future and the prospects for our country. We've had a particular focus with this year's festival on trying to put young people's voices at the center. Young people are the majority of people in South Africa. It's young people's future that we are talking about when we're talking about human rights. So we're hoping to see hundreds and hundreds of young people. There's another young woman called Jennifer Matibi from Hillbrow, and Jennifer is organizing young people in Hillbrow to come to the festival. So youth and children, not just teenagers, but even children are catered for with this festival.
And of course, we can't forget what we saw in KwaZulu-Natal and some other parts of the country recently in Mpumalanga as a result of the heavy rains. And so this conversation of human rights does not take place outside of looking at the effects of climate change in impeding on human rights. Tell us about Nhlanhla CBC, climate and energy campaigner at Greenpeace Africa.
Well, Nhlanhla is another young person. He's part of this international organization called Greenpeace, and Greenpeace, together with other climate activist groups, have been very central to organizing the festival and will be bringing their supporters and members to the festival. And in fact, the climate crisis is also one of the focal points. On Sunday, the 26th of March, the centerpiece of the day will be what we're calling a town hall debate on how to survive the climate crisis. And it will be talking about the impact of the climate crisis on food systems, the impact on energy, the impact on our communities, and what we need to do to build our communities differently if we are going to survive and if we're going to protect human rights. So, again, a lot of the focus of this festival is not about human rights in abstract. It's about human rights in practical terms that we need to understand to protect ourselves, but also to better our lives and to have the possibility of joy and happiness in the future.
And then we cannot speak about human rights and not take a look at the human rights of those who are not necessarily from any country you are in, right? So when we take a look at the issue of xenophobia, which will also be quite extensively covered, an issue also in terms of migration that South Africa is not the only country grappling with it. You've got the Home Secretary of the United Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken, making her way to Rwanda to speak about that trade in terms of exchanging humans from one continent to another. Nigel Branken of Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia.
Yeah, so Nigel Branken he lives in Orange Grove. He's a community activist. He used to live in Hillbrow. He's been around for many years. And, Nigel has been engaging with people from Operation Dudula in the Orange Grove area who came into that area to try to, as they said, drive foreigners out, to close foreign shops. And what happened was that a series of conversations started, and the issue of migration was approached from the perspective of people's human rights and people's dignity. And as a result of that, unlikely opponents were able to find each other and to find that they had their humanity in common and to devise strategies based upon common humanity. So again, at the festival we're having a couple of sessions called How to Have Difficult Conversations. How to have conversations with people who you think are on the other side from you. You think are very different from you. You may even think are opponents, but in fact find that you have common interests and that those common interests can be pursued through human rights and dignity. So, we're trying to do things differently. We're trying to approach human rights in a way that speaks to people's realities, that resonates with people, that gives people ideas about how they can take control of their own lives, how they can take control of their own communities. As we said at the start of this conversation, how do you seize your own power, but use that power for the good of everybody?
Editor at Maverick Citizen, Mark Heywood. Thank you very much, Mark, for your time this Sunday morning.